Hi, this is Sunday, the 16th of May 2021. This is Democratic Alliance Labour Report. Thank you once again for tuning in. I appreciate it. It's been an interesting week, and we're going to discuss some of the budgetary problems with regard to the Department of Employment and Labour. So thank you for listening to me. It would be good if you could share with your friends, colleagues, associates through Facebook and any other means. This is Michael Bagram. I'm the Labour spokesperson for the Democratic Alliance. Well, in this last week, we've had debates about the budget. We've had a report to Parliament. I had the honour of addressing Parliament on Friday. I only got 6 minutes, and I had to try and get in as much as I could to try and report back on why I thought the budget of the Department of Employment and Labour was bad. As you know, all the entities except for NEDLAC under the Department of Employment and Labour failed their audit. The auditors have said that there's been a lot of fraud and corruption, a lot of misdoing, wrongdoing. There are real problems in terms of the budgetary process within the Department of Employment and Labour. What we do know is that with the UIF, you recall, the Unemployment Insurance Fund, we had been complaining over a 6-month period that there seems to be fraud in the UIF, and eventually, after the Auditor General stepped in and told the Minister that there were problems, they suspended the top management team. That was 7 months ago. They're still suspended on full pay, probably getting their increases, etc. And they're saying that they're having a disciplinary inquiry. Well, we don't know what's actually happening over there. And if anyone in the private sector had to take 7 months to have a disciplinary inquiry, you can imagine that the human resources team would be fired as well. People are getting their full salary for sitting at home, having some rest and recreation, and we in the public are paying income tax to ensure that these people, who are probably fraudulent in the first place, are now earning very handsome salaries by sitting at home. So the Democratic Alliance has actually pointed out that there are enormous problems with all the entities within the Department of Employment and Labour. The reality is that the department is dysfunctional. We know that the compensation fund, for instance, we have spoken about this in a previous post, has been dysfunctional for 20 years. We also know that they're trying to change their legislation to stop third parties suing them because they keep losing their court cases. We understand that the only entity that did work was the CCMA, the Commission for Conciliation, Mediation and Arbitration. That one worked, but they're hollowing it out. They've taken some money away from it, and it seems to be becoming, just like the others, completely dysfunctional. And so what we've got to do is we've got to live through a situation where the Constitution said there's got to be fair labour practice. The Labour Relations Act, Basic Conditions of Employment Act, and all the other 11 pieces of labour legislation offer and promise fair labour practice in the country. Well, you can't have fair labour practice if indeed there's no one policing it. It's like trying to tell people that they have to wear seat belts and you've got no traffic cops. People will then decide to do what they want to do. If there's no oversight and there's no inspection, and there's no money for people who are doing the oversight and inspection and the policing, well, then people will do what they want to do in any event. And many of the employers tell me, well, that's their hard cheese. Sorry, we'll do what we feel like doing. And I don't think that's all that fair. So, look, at the end of the day, the department is going to have a problem for the next few years. Their budget has been cut because they had to use the money for that vanity project, SAA. To keep SAA going, it's costing them billions of rands, and they had to take money from all the other entities. What I did do in Parliament, and I'll quote it for you now if you don't mind me reading it, but I said that all the entities have not delivered, all the entities in Parliament have not delivered, but the department itself thinks that they've delivered and they've done well. And I said, well, I can only quote from Alice Through the Looking Glass. And what I said was, and I quote, "The time has come, the walrus said, to speak of many things. Shoes and ships and sealing wax, cabbages and kings, and why the sea is boiling hot and whether pigs have wings." Now the reality is that makes more sense to me than what the minister told us in Parliament. And I said as much. He didn't seem to understand what it was. I don't think the minister has read Alice Through the Looking Glass and didn't seem to understand the irony of it all. But what was said over here of whether pigs have wings is in fact making more sense to me than what the minister had to say. Well, when you have a look at what's going on with the jewel in the crown of the Department of Employment and Labour, the CCMA, you'll understand why nonsense verses from Alice in Wonderland make so much more sense than what we're seeing from the Department of Employment and Labour. They're supposed to protect labour rights, they're supposed to enforce the labour legislation and dispute resolution, etc., and it's not happening. It's really, really sad that we're experiencing that in South Africa today. And of course, at the end of the day, the CCMA was managing to keep some sort of labour peace. In the 70s and 80s, and maybe most of you won't recall, but I do certainly recall, and especially in my early days as a student, a law student at Rhodes University, I remember the mass strikes that used to go on in the streets and where people were insisting on their political rights at the time. We don't see that much today of that sort of thing. And I think it's because that the CCMA has managed to keep some labour peace. But this is now going to be a thing of the past, and we're probably going to see some of those mass strikes possibly closer to the end of this year. You must recall that we did mention that the local government elections, the municipal elections, are taking place at the end of October. And the unions have to put pressure on government to give them more increases. And one of the ways they're going to try and do it is by threatening mass strikes. Those threats of mass strikes will put government into a complete tiz and probably get them to agree to the increases which they can't afford. Government's got no money. And if they've got no money and they can't afford the increase, then you shouldn't offer it. And we saw that 3 years ago, where we all said to government, you can't have this 3-year wage agreement year upon year, and yet they said, no, we have to do it because we were going through a national election at the time. They paid the increase in the first year, they paid the increase in the second year. In the third year, they said, we can't pay it because there's COVID, which was nonsense, because they still had the same budget as what before they had COVID. They said they're not paying it, and that was in April 2020, before COVID had really affected the economy. And of course, what happened is they used COVID